Hello and welcome. I'm very thankful you're here. This is Jennifer McGuire and I hope everyone is safe and well. So today I'm going to show you my secret trick for quickly coloring in large stamped images like this one. Now I needed to make 50 of this card design because I'm putting packs of cards together to go to different hospitals around the country. So I'm mass producing a few different designs and mixing them up. I really like this large sentiment and large floral image, but you can imagine it would take a long time to color in all those flowers. So I thought I'd break out this old trick to get it done quickly. Making cards like this is very therapeutic to me. It helps me with my anxiety and tough times, and I find the repetitive process of mass producing really calming. Okay, now the stamp set that I used is the Simon Says Stamp Thankful Flowers set. I've used this one before, but I wanted to use that giant sentiment that says you couldn't be more awesome. I thought that was perfect for healthcare workers right now. And then that large flower image. Any large open image would work for this. You want ones that are pretty easy to cut out the different areas, as you'll see. Now I'm stamping this on white cardstock. This is my Hero Arts Black MISTI stamping tool, which is very helpful when you're mass producing and doing a lot of stamping. The cardstock I'm using is Brutus Monroe, not your mama's cardstock. Any white cardstock would work, but this one is really thick and just beautiful to stamp on. So I've arranged in here the large flower and the sentiment, and I have it off to the side. I'll end up trimming this paper down later. Now, I'm going to stamp this with black ink. I decided to use Gina K Obsidian Amalgam Black Ink because it's a very dark black and it stamps very crisp. I'm going to stamp this on 50 pieces of cardstock. This white cardstock is cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I have a lot of white cardstock pre-cut to that size in my craft room. So whenever I want to start stamping, I just grab a piece of that and it's ready to go. I will, as I mentioned, go back and trim a little bit off the side later on. If you've never gotten pre-cut cardstock before, highly recommend doing it. I like to take it to Kinko's FedEx and really give very specific instructions on how to cut down to that size. And I encourage them to be super careful because it's nice cardstock, but it's a huge time saver. So there's all my stamping. I just went through and I got all of my stamping done at once. Mass producing is always easier if you do step by step. Okay, next I'm going to trim down a little bit off the side. I take off about 3/4 of an inch from each. Now I'm actually cutting 2 of these at once because I have a really good trimmer here. This Tim Holtz tonic trimmer cuts beautifully and will cut through those 2 layers, which will save me a lot of time once again. Now it's time to add color to those flowers. You can see all the different colors I used here. I did not do this with markers. I did this by stamping with ink. We're going to create our own stamps in the shape of each of these elements to stamp in those open areas. To do this, I like to use inexpensive white craft foam. I use the kind from Simon Says Stamp, which I have linked below. I have that in my MISTI there, and I'm stamping onto my white craft foam with StazOn ink. Now you could use any ink you have. The reason I chose StazOn Black Ink is because it'll dry pretty quickly on there and I don't have to worry about smearing it as I cut it out, but you could use any ink that you have here. So again, I'm stamping onto white craft foam. It won't come out very crisp. It doesn't matter. You're going to just use this for stamping. It won't be on your final card. I am trying to dry this a little bit by using my heat gun, moving it a lot and holding it up far away. You don't want to warp the craft foam. You just want to dry the ink so it doesn't smear as you're cutting it out, but it's really not that big of a deal. Okay, so now I'm going to cut out a few parts of the image. I'm just using some nice scissors here to get in the nooks and crannies. And if you look, each of these flowers and leaves is pretty easy to cut out. You want to pick out an image that you can easily cut out. Now I'm going to cut out some leaves and some flowers. I actually end up stamping 2 times on 2 pieces of craft foam so I can be sure to get a nice cut around each element. Let's start out by stamping 3 flowers each time. So I have my little craft foam piece here, and on the side with the ink that we stamped on, I'm putting some temporary adhesive. I'm just using my Altenew dot roller adhesive, but you can use anything temporary. I then am going to place that into my MISTI, lining it up with the stamped image on my cardstock. So see how it lines up? You want to make sure the side of the craft foam with ink is facing up. Then you close the door on your stamping tool, and it is temporarily adhered into the stamping door. We can wipe that glue off later, we can clean it off. And I'm going to do the same with 2 other flowers. I'm looking from the side to make sure I've got it lined up nicely. If you don't have a stamping tool, you can definitely temporarily adhere these foam stamps onto an acrylic block. It works great. Okay, so I'm coming in with the 3rd one, putting adhesive on the top, lining it up and closing it. Now we have 3 flower stamps that we can ink up and quickly stamp into our outline, and it looks like we colored it. Okay, so you can use pretty much any inks here. I like to use dye inks. I used a combination of Hero Arts, Gina K, and Altenew today. Now when I first went to stamp it, notice that the flower on the left, it didn't stamp completely. That's because I needed to put a shim under there. I put about 5 pieces of just scrap paper under there to raise up my paper. The reason is clear stamps are thicker than the foam stamp, so I needed to raise up the surface in my MISTI stamping tool. If you're using acrylic block, don't worry about it. But look how beautifully the craft foam takes the ink and then transfers it onto your cardstock piece here. The nice thing is you can change colors on these. I stamped all 50 panels using the same pieces of foam, and I'm saving those foam pieces for later on. So I keep the foam pieces with that stamp set in the same pocket, so if I ever want to do this again, I can. When I want to switch colors, I just wipe it with a wet cloth and then wipe it dry with a dry cloth, and then I can switch on to a different color. So I did a few different color combinations here. I get bored if I make 50 of the same colors. It doesn't bother me to do 50 of the same design if I shake up the colors between each. So I did some little bouquets of pink flowers, blue flowers, purple flowers mix. I did it all. That way I had a bunch of different cards to look at in the end. I ended up at one point removing one of the 3 flowers, so I only had 2 in the same color. So that's why the top ones aren't inked on these. I'll go back and do that flower in a different color later on. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that again. I just wanted to show you one more time. Let's do this flower up here. I cut that flower out, put adhesive on the inked side, line it up, close the door, and then we can stamp this with whatever color we want. Now, this is a great way also to try out different color combinations that you may want to experiment with. I struggle with color combinations, so with something like this, you could look online quickly. You could Google color combinations or interior design colors, things like that. Find color combinations you want to try and do that with the cards like this. When you're making 50, you can try a lot of things, and if one of them isn't your favorite, that's okay. I think the recipient will still like them. Okay, so I continued to do that for the different flowers and the leaves, and surprisingly, it doesn't take that long. Leaves are very easy to cut out. Here I cut out a little center piece from the center of the flowers, and I'm stamping those with a dark yellow ink. I just thought that made it look a little more interesting than just having the solid colored flowers. Okay, so once I was done with all of this, remember I saved all of those little pieces for future cards, but I was able to make 50 cards like this in an afternoon. If I would have colored those with markers, it would have taken me a lot longer. It's hard to see in the video and in the photos, but I did add little yellow dots around the flower because that's just how I am. This time I just used an acrylic block, and look how quickly I can go through the stack and stamp these. And I ended up stamping little yellow dots in 4 different places on the background. Again, it's hard to see in the video, but it did add a little bit more interest in the final cards. Next, I looked at cardstock that I had a lot of to decide what to make my card bases from. I decided to go with the Gina K Craft in the middle there because craft cardstock really matches with any color combination. So I took my 8.5 by 11 cardstock, cut it down the center long ways, and then scored that in half to create these top folding 4.25 by 5.5 inch note cards. I then glued our stamp panel to the right edge, so there's a bit of that craft showing on the left edge. Next, I wanted to add 2 little cardstock strips right along the stamping, just for a little pop of color. Now this is how I did it. I took some scraps and I just quickly cut thin strips. Look how fast you can cut these. I'm not measuring to make them all the perfect same size. I just want thin little scraps I can add. It's a great way to use up any of those extra pieces of cardstock you may have. You can also use leftover glitter cardstock or specialty cardstocks for this. And watch how easy it is to add these to your project. Super easy. I take my liquid adhesive and watch, I'm going to run it right along the edge of my stamp panel. So it's dragging right across the edge, so I can easily apply it and keep it straight. Then I put the thin strip of cardstock right on it, press it down. Now I can do that again. This time I went out a bit because this is a wider piece of cardstock I'm putting down. I let that dry for a few minutes and then I can trim the excess off the top and the bottom. Now here I was thinking I was going to do matching pieces of cardstock strips for each card. So you see me using some glitter cardstock and some pink cardstock. But then I decided it would really be a lot easier if I used a gold cardstock strip and a green cardstock strip on all of my cards. The gold added a classic touch and the green matched the leaves that I did on every single card. So it was a big time saver to do that. So after I completed all of the cards, I went through my stash and found a matching envelope for each one. I really like to do matching envelopes because I think it makes for a nice presentation of the card that you put a lot of heart into. So let's take a closer look. This is the design that I did on most. I did a gold cardstock strip and then a light green cardstock strip. You can see how I got solid color inside of those flowers by creating my own stamps. Now I also did want to show you that I stamped a greeting on the inside. This sentiment is from the same stamp set, and I thought it was perfect for inside of these Healthcare Hero cards. All I did was when I completed the card, I opened it up, put it in my MISTI stamping tool, stamped that greeting, closed it, and went on to the next one. And before you know it, I had 50 cards ready to go. Before we go, I just wanted to say a few things. I'm hearing a lot of people are feeling stuck creatively, maybe due to anxiety or stress or the unknown that's in the world today. If that's the case for you and you're wanting to create, if it's therapeutic for you, try mass producing some simple designs like this. You could come up with an even more simple card if you want to. Look back at some cards that you've made in the past that you like, or look around on Instagram for something that you can be inspired by. Make a bunch of them. There's something therapeutic about the repetitive nature of mass producing and then the joy of giving all those out. For those of you who still have to go out every day to work to make life normal for the rest of us and help protect us, I give you my biggest thanks and the biggest long distance hug I can. I really appreciate all you're doing. If you are interested in the products I used today, they are linked below in my YouTube description. And in the middle here, I have a couple other videos for you. Please stay safe, please stay healthy, and I hope you find a little time to create today. Have a good one.